I'm Tracy Sabol. Tonight on EWTN News Nightly, hot topic. Former President Trump addresses a possible abortion ban, how the White House is responding. Back and forth. Analysis of an immigration law in Texas and why courts have issued vastly different rulings on it. Stepping down. Shocking news from Ireland following an announcement from the Prime Minister. And artificial intelligence. Why Pope Francis says we are called to be smart saints. These stories and more tonight.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you for being with us on the Feast of St. Herbert. Our top story tonight, the presidential race takes another big step forward with more primary results. Tuesday's elections also provided a boost for some statewide candidates aligned with former President Donald Trump. Meantime, abortion continues to be a hot campaign topic on the national stage. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen.
Tracy, former President Donald Trump is hinting at an abortion compromise that he says could bring the country together. During a radio interview, he said people are agreeing on 15 weeks of pregnancy as a cutoff for abortions, but he maintains it's a state issue. The Biden campaign takes a completely different view.
President Joe Biden on a West Coast campaign swing highlights the contrast between himself and his rival.
All of us in this room have one fundamental difference between us and Trump. I mean it sincerely. We have a different value set.
Former President Donald Trump pushes back, accusing Biden of making America weaker.
Our country's going downhill very fast, very rapidly. Millions of people coming across the border, coming from jails, from prisons.
The former president has supported pro-life laws and justices. Vice President Kamala Harris uses that against him, writing in part, he is proud that young women today have fewer rights than their mothers and grandmothers. How dare he? Still, Trump is one step closer to the Republican presidential nomination, winning delegates from states including Florida, Illinois, and Ohio. Other candidates that he endorsed also won their primaries, including a closely watched race in the Buckeye State. Trump-backed Cleveland businessman Bernie Moreno defeated two challengers in Ohio's Republican Senate primary. Moreno is now set to face incumbent Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown in the November general election. Brown's seat is a top GOP target.
It has been a state that has increasingly gone from competitive to a pretty solid Republican area, and that'll be the true test this November.
And U.S. Congressman Mike Bost, endorsed by Trump, won the Republican primary in southern Illinois, where he's widely expected to win again in November. And in California, Trump-backed Vince Fong, a Republican state legislator, advanced to a special election in May that will decide who completes former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy's term.
Meanwhile, President Joe Biden's campaigning continues out west. He'll be in Texas, in the Dallas, Texas area tonight, and in Houston tomorrow before returning here tomorrow night. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
All right, thank you, Owen. President Biden also visited Chandler, Arizona today. Arizona could be a decisive swing state come November. The president also stopped by Intel's campus, announcing billions of dollars in direct funding and loans for computer chip plants in 4 states.
Folks, during the pandemic, we had to learn about supply chains and the shortage of semiconductors. Those tiny computer chips you all out here know very well, smaller than the tip of your finger, that power everything from the lives of your cell phones, cars, dishwashers, satellites, weapon systems.
Biden inspected silicon wafers and chips on a tour. The U.S. designs advanced chips, but its inability to make them domestically has emerged as a national security and economic risk. Intel's projects will be funded in part through the CHIPS and Science Act. Well, from a government investment plan to a former president who needs a loan, the New York Attorney General is pushing back on Trump's request to stay his $464 million civil fraud judgment, telling an appeals court to ignore the argument. In today's filing to the judge, attorneys wrote defendants here had no reason to wait for their reply to raise their allegations and arguments about the difficulty of obtaining a bond, as their efforts to obtain that bond began before their stay motion was filed and indeed before judgment was even entered. Earlier this week, Trump's attorneys said that it was nearly impossible for the former president to secure a bond after he was turned down by 30 insurance companies. Trump has until Monday to post the money. All right, now to the 2020 election interference case in Georgia. In a brief order issued today, Judge Scott McAfee cleared the way for former President Trump to appeal a recent ruling that allowed Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis to remain on the prosecution. McAfee rejected a bid by Trump and his co-defendants to disqualify Willis and to throw out the case because of a romantic relationship that Willis had with a special prosecutor. Trump and his allies are accused of engaging in a scheme to reverse the outcome of the last presidential election in Georgia. The former president has also told the Supreme Court that he should be granted absolute immunity from criminal charges stemming from election interference case. Trump's legal team filed a brief Tuesday saying that he should have immunity, that is, from any official acts that he undertook as president. They added if the ruling is rejected, it could incapacitate every future president. Oral arguments are scheduled for April 25th. A legal game of seesaw over a Texas immigration law. The measure would allow Texas authorities to deport migrants who cross into the country illegally. After the hold on the law was temporarily lifted, an appeals court put a new hold on the law late Tuesday night. The court heard an hour of oral arguments and did not indicate when they will rule. The Biden administration challenges that the law oversteps federal authority. Texas argues that the law is in line with federal immigration policy. This comes as the state of Arkansas announced 40 National Guard troops will be headed to Texas to assist with border security efforts. All right, let's bring in Rodney Scott, Distinguished Senior Fellow for Border Security at the Texas Public Policy Foundation and former Chief of the U.S. Border Patrol. Rodney, good to see you again, as always. This Texas immigration law is giving a lot of people whiplash, so to speak. Let's talk about where things are right now and what happens, Rodney, if it goes back into effect.
So really, it's a border security law, not just immigration law. And I think some people misunderstand that. And even Texas's piece of it that would tell people that enter the United States illegally in violation of federal law, they can't be in Texas. It just orders them to voluntarily leave. It doesn't include a deportation. That would be a federal piece. And that's what would take place if it goes into law. But I think this was anticipated that it would go, well, that it would make it to the Supreme Court. Maybe the tennis ball thing we're seeing now wasn't really anticipated. But the fact that it goes to the Supreme Court and gets decided there, that's where it will ultimately end up. But Texas is arguing a very unique aspect that no other state has argued before, because we've never seen this chaos. And that is under the Constitution of the United States. The states have a right to defend themselves from invasion. That's the difference between this case and some of the other cases like in Arizona in the past that were strictly about immigration. Texas is arguing the federal government has walked away from their responsibility to protect the states as required under the Constitution, and they're leveraging their right under the same U.S. Constitution, which is more important than any law written under that they can protect themselves. And all they want to do is simply use the laws that are on the federal books and enforce them to protect Texas and the country.
Yeah, and of course, the U.S. is arguing that this oversteps federal authority. Your thoughts on that, Rodney?
Yeah, again, I think it's a unique angle that because Texas is arguing the invasion clause, the premise of this is based in the U.S. Constitution. The federal government has not carried out their responsibility. That it's going to be up to the courts to decide, but it is a unique argument, and I think Texas has a lot of ground to stand on here. We've never in the history of my 30-year career or the history of the United States, to my knowledge, seen the federal government use their authority or their supremacy clause, if you will, to not enforce the law, to literally unsecure the border. It's a very different argument today than what we saw in the Arizona case quite some years ago, where the court ruled against the state. But ultimately, no one knows what the Supreme Court's going to do because it is a unique argument.
Yeah, there's concern by some that this law, that it may lead to racial profiling if an officer asks someone a question about their immigration status for any reason. What do you have to say to that?
Yeah, I think that people are exaggerating and they're listening to rhetoric as opposed to actually reading the law. So I've read the law. Basically what it does is it's dealing with the illegal entry. It's dealing with illegal immigration. It's not encouraging law enforcement officers to run around Dallas or Fort Worth asking about immigration status. It's about interdicting people that are illegally entering the United States or just now recently illegally entered the United States in violation of law, and then holding them accountable. Texas is arresting them now and prosecuting them with trespass, but it's short of being able to order them to leave the country or to leave the state. And that's what SB 4 does, is takes it to that next level. But I think the fears and the rhetoric is it's exaggerated. That is not what this law is doing in any way, shape, or form.
Ronnie, almost out of time here, but how do you think, this crisis can be solved? What's the best way forward, do you think?
The best way forward, unfortunately, the Biden administration has lined out their strategy and their policies, and they're not going to change. So every step the Biden administration takes is to fight against different states that are trying to protect themselves and protect the border. So this comes down to what the voters want for this country in November, and that's really where this is ultimately going to be decided. Do we have a border? Do we care about the border and enforce the laws or not? Because we have two very diametrically opposed candidates, and it'll be up to Americans to decide what they want for America.
All right, we're going to leave right there. Ronnie, always good to be with you. Thank you for your insights. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
On Capitol Hill, big news for pro-lifers. The text for the $1 trillion funding bill for 6 federal departments is out, and the Hyde Amendment and other pro-life protections are included, upholding a nearly 40-year tradition. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales has more. Eric?
Good evening, Tracy. There was a huge sigh of relief among pro-life lawmakers. Democrats had threatened to block a ban on taxpayer money going to fund abortions. But House Speaker Mike Johnson confirmed to me legacy riders like the Hyde Amendment remain.
Yeah, we maintained all the Hyde protections, so there's no federal funding for abortion, and that's always been a part of our tradition and our funding, and we were able to fight and hold that line. Congress has an oversight responsibility over that to ensure that that is maintained.
House Democratic leaders confirm that long-standing pro-life provisions are in, but they're also claiming victory, that a number of pro-abortion rights remain.
We told them that they were going to become law. They did it anyway. Thankfully, with the leadership of Rosa DeLauro and Leader Jeffries and our ranking members in appropriations, we were able to beat those back. And so none of those made it across the finish line.
The Heritage Foundation weighed in, telling me each year it's a fight.
Whenever trying to move the ball forward to enact new funding restrictions, for instance, stopping the Department of Defense from paying for abortion travel, or stopping the Veterans Affairs Department for doing abortions illegally at of VA facilities, it equally makes it just as challenging to enact new riders like those to further protect taxpayers from having to fund abortion.
Congressional Pro-Life Caucus Chair Congressman Chris Smith agrees.
We need to protect life, but don't facilitate it, death, by paying for it. So that's at a minimum, and this administration has pushed every which way to put more money into the effort to kill babies and to get rid of the Hyde Amendment and all the other amendments.
Some House Freedom Caucus members are already speaking out against passing the $1 trillion funding bill, claiming, quote, it does nothing to secure the border or stop weaponized government targeting Biden's political enemies and innocent Americans. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu held a closed-door video conference with Senate Republicans today. GOP lawmakers say they disagree with Democrat Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, who just last week called for new leadership in Israel, claiming Netanyahu is an obstacle for peace.
I care more about Israel. They're our true ally. We need to protect them. They're not only fighting to win, but they're fighting for their life and their well-being and the future of their country. So, hey, I'm all in.
Netanyahu called Senator Schumer's comments totally inappropriate. House Speaker Mike Johnson says that he spoke with Netanyahu this morning and plans to invite him to address a joint session of Congress in the weeks ahead. An Israeli raid on the Al-Shifa hospital has entered its third day. The military says that it's carrying out an operation targeting senior Hamas officials who had allegedly regrouped there. Battles in and outside the hospital have killed dozens. Palestinians sheltering in the facility are reporting long detentions by soldiers as well as abuse. Amid criticism from many Western countries, Chinese officials are defending Hong Kong's new national security law set to quash public dissent.
中方对个别国家和机构诋毁、抹黑香港维护国家安全条例。
The Beijing-backed measure was unanimously approved. The new law expands the government's ability to eliminate pro-democracy protests with punishments such as life in prison. This comes years after the historic rallies in 2019. Well, some surprising news now from the Emerald Isle. Prime Minister Leo Varadkar is stepping down.
There's never a right time to resign high office. However, this is as good a time as any. My reasons for stepping down are both personal and political. I believe this government can be re-elected, and I believe my party, Fine Gael, can gain seats in the next Dáil.
Varadkar was elected back in 2017 as Ireland's youngest and first gay prime minister. He also played a key role in campaigning for 2 rejected referendums targeting traditional family values earlier this month. Varadkar will remain in office until a successor can be appointed in April. All right, now to Vietnam, where the president has resigned only after a year in the job. In a statement, the ruling Communist Party said President Vo Van Thuong had stepped down due to, quote, violations and shortcomings. He is the second president to resign in 14 months. It comes amid a corruption crackdown that has seen the arrests of hundreds of government officials. No word yet on who may replace him. And we have a lot more still to come here on EWTN News Nightly, including abortion in America. A new report shows a disturbing increase in abortions since the overturning of Roe versus Wade. And a lawsuit settlement could lead to a major shakeup in the real estate industry. We'll break it down how it could affect you. Interest rates hold steady at a 23-year high as the Federal Reserve keeps a key number unchanged for a 5th straight time. However, the Fed did signal that it expects to slash the interest rate 3 times this year. Fed Chair Jerome Powell says that inflation has certainly cooled, but it is still too high, leaving the path forward uncertain. The National Association of Realtors has reached a $418 million settlement in an antitrust lawsuit. The case will have major implications on the real estate industry. The settlement is set to take effect in July, pending a judge's approval. It is expected to change a number of rules and guidelines set by the National Association of Realtors, thought to have artificially raised home prices. The most critical change will come to the standard 6% agent commission, which is likely to be lowered. And here to explain more is Mark Stapp, the Fred E. Taylor Professor of Real Estate at Arizona State University. Mark, thanks so much for coming on. We appreciate it. For those not familiar, can you give us a quick summary of the case itself, the settlement, and why it matters?
So the case is really about a rule that the Association of Realtors had, and it had it in conjunction with the multiple listing service, which is a separate entity but related party in some regards. And there was a requirement when someone listed their homes, the broker was required to have a mandatory offer of compensation to a buyer's broker. And it wasn't a negotiable item with the seller typically, and it was required to be included. And sellers, in the case of the plaintiffs in this case, said, hey, wait a minute, why are we paying the buyer's agent? Why isn't the buyer paying them? And that gave rise to this complaint, and ultimately the suit and the settlement, which calls for the National Association of Realtors and the Multiple Listing Service to not only no longer require it, but prohibit statements like that. And so they're going to make it such that the buyer is now going to be responsible for paying the broker that represents them in a transaction. It's not to say that the seller can't agree to do that, but now it's become a fully transparent, negotiable aspect of the sales process.
So what about someone who's selling a home? How is this going to impact them?
You know, the idea was, or at least some people believed, that this is going to help lower prices. It doesn't really have much effect on them other than the fact that they may not have to pay a full 6%. So they can say to their listing agent, I'm only going to pay you 3%. That's what you were going to get if you shared this commission with someone else anyway. And so they are possibly going to get more money in their pocket. I don't think it's going to lower home prices.
Okay.
But I think what it's going to do is result in sellers possibly ending up with more net proceeds from their sales.
Okay, well, that's good for them. What about real estate agents? Obviously, they work off of commission. So what kind of impact will it have on them?
Yeah, that's a tough one, right? Because they used to be able to rely on the fact if I have a representation of a buyer that I'm going to get paid, and I'm probably going to get paid somewhere around 2.5%, 3%. And that no longer is the case. So they have to enter into what they call buyer broker representation agreements now. And I believe that they're going to have to submit that agreement every single time that they want to engage in a showing or negotiation of the purchase of a house with the selling agent. And so it's a little bit more cumbersome. One of the things that it's likely going to do is it's going to make it more difficult for buyers on the low end to afford buying a home, because this will be more cash out of their pocket. Previously, when you purchased a home, you had the full purchase price as part of what you were including in the mortgage that you would take out. And so those commissions were already baked into it. In this case, the buyer side of the equation is no longer baked into that mortgage, and mortgages prohibit paying buyers' brokers out of mortgage commissions. So, one of my fears is those who can least afford it are the ones going to be impacted the most, and that's buyers, below the median income, buyers at the affordable entry level.
Yeah, and that was what I was going to ask you. I mean, that's a big concern for a lot of people. Can they buy a house now, or should they rent? Really quickly, almost out of time, but what would you suggest people do right now who are sort of, trying to figure that out in this economy?
Yeah, I think you have to be very aware of what your own financial resources are. What you don't want to do is become house poor, right? So you chase purchasing the house, you spend all your money and don't realize that owning a house can sometimes be very expensive. And you don't want to see people get in trouble financially by having spent all of their available resources to buy it and then find it to be a stress. So I think you really have to do some soul searching and budgeting, and don't take on more than what you're capable of taking on.
Yeah, very good advice, Mark. Thank you so much. We appreciate you weighing in. Thanks so much.
Most welcome. Have a good day.
You too. Up next on EWTN News Nightly, naming a bishop. Learn how one church leader is going from the hustle and bustle of Detroit to the banks of the mighty Mississippi. Plus, get smart. Why the Holy Father says we are called to be intelligent saints. Report from a pro-abortion group says that abortions in the United States have reached their highest level in more than a decade. A study by the Guttmacher Institute finds in 2023 alone, there were more than 1 million abortions. The report also suggests that chemical abortion pills are now a more common option than ever, with more than 2/3 of abortions in 2023 being induced by abortion pills. Even as the procedure all but stopped in the 14 states with total bans, close to every other state has had an increase in abortions from 2020 to 2023. Well, the Supreme Court has decided not to consider a case regarding a Catholic family's transgender child. A Catholic couple from Indiana filed a lawsuit after their son was removed from their home because they refused to accept his self-declared female identity. Abuse charges against the couple were later dropped. In a statement following the Supreme Court's rejection, Mary and Jeremy Cox said, quote, "We can't change the past, but we will continue to fight for a future where parents of faith can raise their children without fear of state officials knocking on their doors." Pope Francis has appointed a new head for the Diocese of La Crosse, Wisconsin. The Holy Father selected Detroit Auxiliary Bishop Gerard Battersby. The Diocese of La Crosse spans 19 counties in Wisconsin with 156 parishes serving 135,000 faithful. Bishop-elect Battersby expressed his excitement, saying the Lord has called him to western Wisconsin to the banks of the mighty Mississippi. He will officially be installed on May 20th. Well, finally tonight, Pope Francis reminds the faithful that we are not only called to be saints, but we are also called to be intelligent ones.
E a San Giuseppe raccomandiamo anche le popolazioni della martoriata Ucraina.
And as weekly talk at the Vatican, the Holy Father said that we can become intelligent saints through the virtue of prudence. He says Christ used prudence at the center of many of his parables. He added that prudence is not only about being timid or overly cautious. Instead, it is about being smart and thinking things through. We thank you for watching tonight. Remember, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, X, and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Tracy Sabol. Good night and God bless.